What's up guys, AD back with another Destiny Child video, and in today's video everyone, we are going to be overviewing teams suggested by Saturn for the raid bosses that you will encounter in the Spacewalk game mode. So a huge thanks to Saturn for putting together this guide for all of us to follow, and hopefully these suggested teams here will help you guys in clearing the bosses in the Spacewalk, as I have seen a ton of players struggling with which team compositions to go with. So we'll be overviewing Saturn's suggestions in today's video. But before we get started everyone, make sure to leave a like on this video, as well as be sure to subscribe to the channel, and of course make sure to check out channel memberships down below if you're interested in further supporting the channel. And of course a huge thank you to all of the members that have joined so far. But with all of that being said, let's get started here with Saturn's guide for the 5v5 bosses similar to the Ragnarok. So for the first suggestion here, we do have the universal teams that should be able to clear most if not all of the bosses in the Spacewalk. So first up here we do have the team of Pepita and her wood team. As for the notes here, Pepita's team has the ability to clear 5-person bosses even of the off elements, but her counter elements fire proves too much of a challenge as she can't punch through all of the additional defense from counter elements. So it's suggested not to attempt the fire boss with this team, such as the final boss being Demeter of the Spacewalk. As for the leader skill, we are running Elysian leader, and for the childs on this team we are running Pepita, Maid Citri, Elysian, either Nubimona or Grilla, and Yuna. As for the skill order, you should run tap slide or tap slide slide on Pepita, slide tap tap on Citri, slide tap tap on Elysian, slide tap on the 4th slot, and slide tap on Yuna. As for the attack stat order, you should go with Pepita being the highest attack, followed by Elysian and ending off with Citri. And for the drive order, we have Elysian into Yuna drive, and for the suggested Carta, we have the Aura Soul Carta for Pepita and any HP/defense Carta for the other 4 units. Next here we have the universal team consisting of Tokika and her water type team. Now this team does happen to have Tokika as leader, and it's suggested to have Tokika at high investment, so I would definitely recommend to have her fully ignited if you are considering using this team, as she does require high investment. But of course for the other units on this squad, we do have Leo, Neardy or Swimsuit Davi, Arat, and Lupin. As for the skill order, you should run Tokika on tap slide or tap slide slide. For Leo here, slide tap tap. For Neardy or Swimsuit Davi, you should run slide. For Arat here, slide tap tap. And for Lupin, slide tap tap. As for the attack stat order, you should run Tokika on highest attack, followed by Arat and ending off with Leo. And for the drive order, you should run Arat into Neardy or Swimsuit Davi and end off with Leo. As for the suggested Carta, you should run Welcome on Tokika or the Eve Soul Carta on her as well. And for the other 4 units, you should run any other HP/defense Carta. So these are the suggested universal teams. Now if you guys don't happen to have these teams well invested into, don't worry too much, as you could of course always counter each boss with their counter element. So now we'll be overviewing teams that should be considered being ran if you don't happen to have these universal squads invested into very much. So starting out with the first boss, we do have Bari that you will encounter in Spacewalk. Now she does happen to have poison, which is pretty annoying, but if you are running the counter element, you should be able to clear her fairly easily with the Pepita team. But we also do have some other suggestions here as well from Saturn's raid guide. Now for this portion of the video, I won't be reading every single skill order and a drive order, etc. So make sure to pause the video if you guys are interested in seeing each comp. Of course the units are on screen, as you can see my cursor. Under them you will have the skill order as well as the suggested ignition, and of course the drive order here with the numbers being 1, 2, and 3. And for some teams, as you can see with the Elysian squad on the right, you may run only 2 drive skills, such as this comp for example. Now to start out on the top left, we do have Pepita, Grilla, Maid Citri, Nubimona, and Yuna. For the next squad, we do have Pepita, Elysian, Maid Citri, Nubimona, and Yuna. And for the next 2 suggested raid teams, we do have Mech Commander, Yuna, Anemone, Nubimona, and Neptune. And for the final team, we have Annie, Grilla, Maid Citri, Aura, and Yuna. Now of course with any team now, you can definitely sub in a unit like Anemone onto any roster if you do happen to lack sustainability, as of course she is a universal support for any type of raid team. So let's say you're dying a ton with the first squad recommended here for Pepita, you can definitely sub out a unit like Nubimona and toss in Anemone for more sustainability if you do happen to need it. So that's just some advice there. Always make sure to mix and match with some units if you do happen to be struggling with a certain composition that is recommended. And of course, do keep in mind the boss's buffs and debuffs. As mentioned earlier, Bari does happen to have poison, so you'll want to have a ton of sustain to counter that. Moving on to the light teams here, everyone, as of course the next boss would be Rita, and she is a dark element boss. As for the debuffs Rita does have, she happens to have decay and time alteration. So for the first team here, we have Titania, Anemone, Wodan, Samil, and Salos. For the next team here, we have Titania, Nimhain, Wodan, Samil, and Salos. For the next two teams here, everyone, we have Titania, Neptune, Anemone, Nubimona, and Salos. And for the team on the right, we have Bridal Hilder, Nimhain, Wodan, Samil, and Salos. As for the final two team recommendations, as of course you can see, these are very high investment, but we do have Laura, Nimhain, Wodan, Samil, and Salos. And for the final team composition, we have Light Frey, Nimhain, Wodan, Samil, and Salos. Moving on to the next boss, which would be Isolde. She happens to be a water type of boss yet again, and she does happen to have stun and gauge down for her debuffs. So moving back to the wood teams here, make sure to just pick up any one of these squads and use what works best for you. Of course, the top left here with Pepita, Grilla, etc. would be the best, as well as the Elysian comp, so make sure to keep these teams in mind. But since we did overview this elements earlier for the Bari boss, I won't waste time going over them once again. Moving on to the next boss, which happens to be Alter Davi. She does happen to be a dark boss once again, just like Rita, so make sure to pick up one of these suggested light type teams here that we did overview earlier for Rita, and they should work very well against Alter Davi as well, as of course she is a dark boss, so you'd want to counter her with a light team. Moving back to the wood team recommendation, since the next boss does happen to be Anemone. Now the interesting thing about Anemone's boss in Spacewalk is that she does happen to have reflect, so it is very highly recommended to use Aura in the Anemone boss to counter her reflect, as of course it will kill you a ton if you don't happen to run this unit, or if you don't happen to have a ton of sustainability as well as heal on hit on your weapon. So make sure to run a team consisting of Aura, as of course she will be of big help against Anemone, as I have seen a ton of players struggling against her. So make sure to run a unit like Aura on your team, as well as some other sustainability units such as Anemone, Nubimona, etc. And of course you'll want to keep the core of the wood team being Pepita, Maid Citri, and Yuna, and either swap in Grilla or Elysian depending on your comp, but you'll definitely want to use Aura against Anemone. Moving on to the next boss, everyone, you will encounter in the spacewalk. This will be Morgan. So Morgan does happen to be a fire element, so you will want to use one of your water teams to counter her. As for the first team recommendation, of course we do have Tokika's team consisting of her, Nirdi, Leo, Arat, and Lupin. Next up here we do have Vairupa, Nirdi, Leo, Arat, and Lupin. And for the last two team recommendations, we have Eve, Neptune, Thisbe, Nubimona, and Lupin. And for the final team, we have Vairupa, Leo, Nirdi, Thisbe, and Arat. So make sure to pick up one of these squads to counter Morgan if you don't happen to do well with either the Pepita team, but of course the Tokika team or Vairupa's team will work very well. And you can also get by this boss by using Eve if you do happen to have the water supports invested into well also. Next up here, everyone, we do have the 2-5 boss being Aria. So of course she is a light type element, so you'll want to use a dark team to counter her. Now Aria does happen to have electrocute, but you should be able to beat her if you do have a decent dark team. So starting out here, we do have the recommendations of Eve, Neza, Tiwaz, Samil, and Lupin. For the next team, we have Ophoes, Neza, Tiwaz, Samil, and Lupin. And for the next two teams here, we do happen to have Ophoes, Neptune, Thisbe, Nubimona, and Lupin. And for the final team, we have Artemis, Neza, Tiwaz, Samil, and Lupin. As for the team on the left here, we do have Eve, Ophoes, Tiwaz, Neza, and Lupin. And for the team on the right here, you can pretty much ignore it, as we don't happen to have this unit here on global just yet. Moving on to the next boss you will encounter, everyone, this will be Nicole. Now Nicole is a wood type boss, and she does happen to have stun and slow debuffs in her kit. So for her counter elements here, you'll want to use a fire team, and we only have two recommendations here, starting with the first consisting consisting of Courtesan Bathory, Failnaught, Rusalka, Teresa, and Lupin. And for the next team, we do have Courtesan Bathory, Neptune, Anemone, Nubimona, and Lupin. As for the second to last boss, everyone, we do have Iphis here, which does happen to be a dark boss. She does happen to have Stun and Electrocute as her debuffs. So since she is a dark type element, you'll want to use a light team. And as we overviewed earlier, you can pretty much just pick up one of these light teams here, and you should be able to clear her if you do have decent investments. So of course, the highest prioritization would be the Titania teams, but if you don't happen to have her well invested into, you can also consider the Bridal Hilder teams, or you can use Gunslinger Hilder, as well as the teams consisting of Lights Frey, as well as Laura. As for the final boss being Demeter, everyone, you'll want to use a water team, since of course she is a fire boss. Now Demeter does happen to have Reflect as well as Venom, so she is a very hard-hitting boss in the spacewalk, so you'll definitely want to use a team like Tokika's comp or Vairupa, as I don't believe any of the other water attackers will be able to beat her, as she is pretty difficult. So hopefully you do happen to have your Tokika or Vairupa well invested into, as of course we did mention these team compositions earlier, so make sure to copy one of the teams shown here on screen, and make sure to definitely use a heal on hit weapon against Demeter, as she does happen to have damage over time, and of course the very annoying Reflect debuff. So for your attacker, I would definitely suggest using a heal on hit weapon, and that would be the third option on your weapon. So that'll pretty much do it for the 5v5 PvE boss recommendations for the spacewalk. All thank you to Saturn's guide here. So a huge thank you once more to Saturn for putting this guide together for us all to follow. It has been of big help to a ton of players that have encountered it so far. So a huge thank you once more for this beautiful guide, and hopefully the team recommendations in today's video did happen to help some of you out that haven't cleared the spacewalk just yet. So make sure to let me know in the comment section below if this video was helpful to you at all, and of course make sure to check out Saturn's guide linked in the description box below of this video if you're interested in keeping it around. So that'll pretty much do it for today's Destiny Child spacewalk guide discussing the bosses. Now in the next guide we will discuss Saturn's recommendations for the Cluster Lord bosses, which is pretty much a solo world boss, so stay tuned for that video. But before you go, everyone, make sure to leave a like on this video, as well as be sure to subscribe to the channel, and of course check out channel memberships down below if you're interested in further supporting the channel, as well as the links to my Twitter account and of course to my Twitch channel if you're interested in following me there as well. But with all of that being said, I'll catch you all in the next Destiny Child video. As always, thank you all so much for watching.